Well, hello, and thank you for joining me today. I'm a little bit early with this. The Black Beast is I don't know, I haven't come up with a name for it yet, but we're waiting on the Z890 boards to come out and the new chip so I can see how that goes, and I might wait a little while to see how the reviewers think of it. Now, this particular case is a Lian Li 011 EVO, which I don't plan on turning any of the lights on, and it's okay. It's certainly big enough for what I want it to do. The thing is, I'm building it in the opposite mode, and one of the things I think they could have done better is down here on the wherever the switch is, they should have given a generic switch instead of writing something on there, you know, like the 0 or the 1 for the power, that sort of thing. That would be universally acceptable versus that. That's a small thing because it won't be turning it off and on very much. What we have at the heart of this, although you know if you watch any of the shows, well, I interrupt myself to tell you this. I have been working on the computer to see if I can get the screen captures a little sharper image, to see if I can't speed up the compiling of the videos from the editor to the finished product, the production. And I'm going to try something a little bit different this time. I'm not going to speed it up, say 10%. I usually speed things up because I talk very slowly. And I figure you can listen faster and it will take less of your valuable time to do this. And I just need to tell you right now to click like and subscribe because it helps me out against the YouTube algorithm. The beast is not my friend, but you are. So anyway, on this video, I'm gonna introduce some things that I bet you haven't thought of because I don't see them in wide distribution on the internet. And I am an old engineer. I think things a little bit differently. I'm a little plainer spoken than some of the personalities out there. But anyway, let's get to it. And then at the end, comment. Tell me if you think this is any better, or if I talk too much, or if I'm just a big dolt or whatever. Even a bad response is good for the algorithms. We appreciate you. Click like and subscribe. Thanks. What we have at the heart of this, although you know if you watch any of the shows, I'm not a big fan of getting more money out of people by the light things. I don't really get the whole light thing. You know, it's okay. I've got the other two machines have lights in them, but I don't have the ARGB stuff that makes it look like a knocking shop in Las Vegas. But I did spend some money on the fans, and these are the Be Quiets. I think I've got a note on it. That's to remind me I've got the extra feet attached into this one. And they're nice little fans. These are Silent Wings Pro 4 PWM. I bought them because they have given an extremely long lifespan on them. And this very well may be my last PC I built in my lifetime. Because I used to build PCs back when I was young. Gave it up somewhere around Intel sued AMD for using 486, and the court said, no, Intel, you cannot copyright a number. That's why we have name processors today. That was around the 486. I think it was the Pentium that was already developed but hadn't been launched, was launched under Pentium versus the 586 because Intel lost that lawsuit. And AMD has always been such a petulant little child anyway, constantly just being like a little chihuahua, annoying as it could be. And I'm not a super big AMD fan or super big Intel fan. I don't really have a dog in that fight, and neither one of them sends me a check or parts. But the reality is very simple. Intel is the giant and AMD is no Goliath. So anyway, we have this case. What are we doing with it? Well, I decided I did not want to build white because that's what everybody is doing. They build white and they put fans that I don't really think are necessarily worth the money. There's nothing special about them. And to use them, since there's no real standard, so to speak, and they all want you to get into their software, which is often glitchy. They want you to get into buying their ecosphere, their stuff. So even like this pump that you see in there, if you've watched the video on blacking it out, it came with a controller and a little LED light ring. Certainly not worth $60 to me. I don't intend to do that, but it's not available any other way. Now, if you can see the pump in here, I did go with this particular pump because I could find no alternatives that I would consider to be, quote, quality, as if I know. But that's just what we did. And I would have preferred having a larger reservoir, but I didn't want to put the pump very low because I'm going to have to change this computer's diapers from time to time. And having to do that, I need to make it where I can get to it and do my adjustments and everything. So these fans that I showed you, right? Well, these are the 3-speed jobs because I'm really not sure how much wattage I'm going to have to get rid of because I haven't decided what I'm going to put in there. And I think Arrow Lake is going to be a lot less power, the watt density on the chip, the top of the chip, the number of watts for that area, I think is going to be diminished somewhat. And that's great if they're able to give the performance we're looking for. What I'm getting out of the rumor mill is that they're doing away with the hyper threading and just going more to a parallel processing type thing. Someone said that a person from Intel said, well, we don't need to make high power processors anymore. The world is moving to AI and GPUs to do the processing, so we don't need all that much. I don't know if that's true or not. But anyway, you see the reservoir is sufficient, so I don't have to mess with it too much. But I do have it raised in this middle position on this 420 all copper alpha cool 60 mil. Well, I got the handheld out for this because it's just too difficult to do it any other way. This is a 420 rad on the other side of it. You can see looks rusty, but it's just the copper on the other side of that. And it's very finicky. There's a very small place it can go in, and that's a pain in the butt. Now, how do you put it in without losing your cool? Well, to be quite honest, we put in a screw here, just a fan screw and a fan screw to locate this one fan, and giving it a little bit of room to go up or down. Got the radiator on the other side, got it lined up through a screw here and here, make sure they lined up, and they did. So what we did is pull the radiator back out and go ahead and mount the other two fans using just the fan screw here and here. And with them in place, I was able to take and route the cables, bundle the cable the way I want to for the fan, set the fan speed to the middle, because these are 3-position PWM Be Quiet fans, 140 millimeter. Got those set up. That worked out. And then once we get the radiator placed back into place, we can come back in here and put the 6 screws in each of the fans. Now, once we get that done, as we have here, we're going to pull out the fan screws and replace those with radiator screws. More effective at conducting than aluminum is. That's why we use copper wiring. We tried back in Carter's years the aluminum, and except for the great big feeders, we don't use it in branch wiring anymore. It's just not as good, but we do use it to cook with. But when you look online, the copper, all copper cookware is a lot more expensive. It works better because it's a better conductor. So these two, there's one in the bottom, there's a 280 in the bottom, there's a 420 in the side, and I have them oriented so that we bring in room air into each one of them. Now, I have some other videos I'll put in here just to flesh out this video. And I apologize, one of the negative things about a black case is I have such a bright light over here to do the production that it's washing me out, and I look like I might be one of those hiding in the basement types. So anyway, the purpose of doing it this way is because the air, you'll never get water temperature really as low as your air. It's almost impossible to do so. You certainly will not get it any cooler than the room air that's coming in across it. Not necessarily where you are next to where the register is, but where the air is entering the box. So you get your best temperatures when your air is going straight into the radiator. Now, pulls are generally better than pushes, and I have a pull configuration on the bottom because I can do that and it makes sense. And I have a push on the back of this one because I need it for the geometry. But what I'll show you in just a second is how I plan on running the pipes for this, because this will be a custom loop. Now, I do have a difference of opinion with a young German fellow that likes to do direct dye cooling. Well, I interrupt myself here to be perfectly clear. Now, the young German fellow, I don't want to sound like I'm coming off being ugly to him by any stretch of the imagination. He seemed like a quite nice chap. But he says, this is his words, I'm paraphrasing because I didn't write everything down. Some time ago I watched a video and he says, whenever I use 2 radiators in a loop, I always get questions the comment section fills with comments dealing with why didn't you put some devices between the 2 radiators in the loop? And his response is, well, it doesn't make any difference because you run that pump full blast. And because it runs full blast, it really doesn't matter where you put it. Eventually the water heats up and it doesn't make any difference. Well, here's where you good people have a point. At least I think you do. The point to me is when you run a loop, yes, it is a single, if it's a serial loop, and you don't have a parallel manifold somewhere in there to hit multiple GPUs or whatever. Yes, you can run that water, and if you run it at a high velocity, you can get around and get to everything pretty well because the water will heat up a lot slower because it's sitting on the water blocks for a shorter period of time before it's replaced by the cooler water in the loop. Now, here's my thought. Not all pumps are created equal. Some pumps are lower in capacity, or perhaps they are noisy at high RPM, at full blast, and maybe you don't want to run your pump at full blast. Maybe you want to cut it down to 3/4 or so to keep some of that noise off of it. Well, if we do that, our water is going to pick up more heat per minute because we're running fewer liters per minute or gallons per minute or whatever you want to do it, cups per minute. And so that water will heat up if you run the pump a little slower. Now here's the thing. For my way of looking at it from an engineering standpoint, I would take and run my water to the least power consuming device first, because assuming it picks up some heat, I don't want to dump it. Say if I have in my case that Gen 5 NVMe that I don't have yet, I plan on hitting its water block first because it's only like 12 watts or so. So it's not going to get super hot to begin with. So it's not going to, if it picked up all of the heat, it wouldn't pick up that much of it. And I'd rather take that and hit the CPU that I do want to have very good cool temperatures on. Maybe if I run it at 75% of the pump, I get a little bit more, maybe 2 degrees more on the water, and I get up a little faster. But if I have 2 radiators like I do now, if I return that water through to a second radiator, I can recool that back down, then hit the GPU. Now what if my GPU takes more watts than the CPU? Well, I might use it off of the big radiator and hit it first, and then come back through the smaller radiator and hit the CPU. So I think it can make a difference. It's up to you to decide if you want to try it. I'm certainly going to try it because I've got 2 giant 60 mil rads in there, one 420 and one 280. So I think I should be able to cool off, depending on how I run that water pump. I may, and the fans to go with it, I may be able to kill a couple of kilowatts of heat off of it. And I don't think we're going that direction. The only way I could get that much heat in there to really tax that system that I'm building is if I want, maybe I want to build an AI home unit and I want to have a couple of 4070s or 4090s, something like that in here, and I have more GPUs, and so I put a lot more wattage in it, I might run the loop another way. But I'm not putting the guy down. I'm just saying, I think you guys, the viewers of these, consumers of these type of videos, have a valid point. Why wouldn't you, if you have two radiators, put a device in between the two radiators? Because it may allow you, especially if you have a noisy pump, to run the pump a little slower. Yes, you'll pick up a little more heat probably on each device because you're not running full force through there, but maybe you don't need to. If you were topping out, say, at 80, 81, 82, and running it a little slower, you run up to 87 or so, you probably wouldn't want to run 87 degree water into your next device, whether it be the GPU or CPU. You probably just wouldn't want to do that. So if you can cool it back down in that time frame, or at least take some of that heat back off, there's really not much difference between doing it at full blast and running it at, say, 3/4. Because even if you don't get all of the heat completely back off of it, you're getting some. I think that's okay if you can buy a direct die CPU. I'm totally against the potential wastefulness of destroying a CPU, an expensive CPU, so you can take the integrated heat spreader or heat shield off, because you're taking the chance on ruining that processor for what? For just a little bit more performance? It just doesn't make sense. If you can buy it naked, that's different than taking the chance of destroying something. The same thing with a lot of the design stuff that I see, or what passes for design on the internet, because I see young guys like peeling the stickers off their NVMEs, which voids their warranty. That's just, it doesn't do any good. You really, I think you should have an innate sense that that's not going to do much of anything. And if you're got a lot of risk and very little reward, it doesn't make sense to me as an old engineer. And also the people that design this stuff, that's their job. They study and have a lot more facility and money is behind them than you do. So if they wanted it that way, they'd have built it that way, because they sure would take advantage of your perception in the buying public that it's going to help them if they do something. Now, people do look for content on a regular basis. What you'll notice, I think I can ease around here, and I think it shows with that bright light. It's blinding me. There's something different about how I did this. Otherwise, you know, we have a radiator in the bottom. You can see that. It's also a 60 mil, 280 60 mil, all copper. But I want to talk just briefly about my idea of changing diapers. Now, I have my pump up top. You probably watched the video where I black this out, except for right here, there's a little side glass so I can see if I'm losing water. Water is the enemy, light is the enemy of water, because some things need light to grow by. They also need oxygen. So in an ideal world, we're going to run out of oxygen inside of our system before too long, but stuff can still grow on that amount of water. But then you also have anaerobic bacteria that don't need oxygen to live. You have facultative bacteria, which can do either one. They can be in an oxygenated environment, or they can be in a deprived environment and they still live. They're an example of a non-facultative anaerobic bacteria is botulism. It grows only in the absence of oxygen. Air kills it, and it makes a very bad toxin. But normally we don't have to deal with much more than sliming up our water with, say, an iron-related bacteria, slime bacteria, something like that. But it does go bad. So everything we're doing is so that I don't have to change the diapers very often, not as often as normal. Now what you'll see is this little piece that comes out here. It's a little straight piece. I don't know if this pump requires it, but in general, pumps do better when they have a little bit of a run before you hit a hard corner or change of direction. If you've ever worked with a well, you would know that, because the instructions tell you give it a little bit of running so that we don't have that turbulence and that tendency to cavitate and create gases, to liberate gases from the water. If you like this content, please go to calldell2sell.com, find the tab that says on YouTube, click it, and it'll open up a page of QR codes. There you can use a smartphone to scan and get to the YouTube page, or you can just mouse over and click it on a PC. There you'll be able to subscribe to this little button over here and click the notification bell so that YouTube will notify you. Thank you. Because the instructions tell you, give it a little bit of running so that we don't have that turbulence and that tendency to cavitate and create gases, to liberate gases from the water. We come out of here, we run down this. There is a 45, a set of 45s in here, just so it can kind of slow its roll into the bottom of the rad of this 420. Now it runs up this side, it will go across the top, it will come down the bottom. Out of this one, this is the one that we go to first, our little alpha cool. Let me get that in the center screen. This is for the Gen 5 NVMe because they do run hot. A lot of them that I've seen so far are being reported as being very hot. We do have a little block, not that I know that it actually does any good whatsoever to frame around a CPU. Some people make it seem that it makes a big difference. I don't expect it to make a lot of difference, to be honest with you. And then I have this massive, I'll get a close-up of it, I put a picture in the video, of a CPU block. And this CPU block is not only large, but it's also opaque, so we don't have our light getting into our water there. And if it'll fit, which is a big question, I have a motherboard, I'm sorry, a birthing person board, because you can't say mother anymore. And somehow, I don't know what the deal is. I don't understand this new world, but that's a big block, and that will be the limiting factor on all of it. It's not necessarily how big your loop is, but how well you can take the heat off of that integrated heat shield. And yes, you may get a better coupling direct to die with the IHS off, but you're also now doing it through a much smaller surface area. At a risk, if you're taking the lid off, as they say, you're taking a risk at ruining something. So we've already talked about the airflow coming in. We've talked about the airflow coming in this side, a pool being generally, in my opinion, a little bit better. I mean, if it wasn't, let me ask you this. You have eyes. Go out there in the world and look at your air conditioners. Do they normally push air over a coil or pull it through a coil? There's a reason for that. Not always dramatic, but there's generally a little bit of a benefit of doing a pull over a push. So we have the water coming out of the pump, going in, going across the top, coming out the bottom, going into the cooler, the water cooler for the NVMe. Out of that, we'll go into the CPU, come out of the CPU, and we will return to this line. There's a line, it's black, I know it doesn't show up good, but it'll come off of here and then go into the 280. Now, why am I doing that? Because I don't know how many CPUs or GPUs I'll put in here. Probably just one. And this is certainly big enough, this 420 is certainly big enough to cool a GPU. And then some. But if I want to have a few more, I might want to run my water slower so that I get good contact time across the water blocks. And that will allow it to pick up a little bit more heat with lower gallons per minute or liters per minute if you're metric. And that will help, I think, with the noise level. The radiators themselves are big enough that I don't need much air at all. I certainly don't need as much air as those Be Quiets will produce. But the idea is to have very low number of exchanges of air volume within my case, because if I water cool the GPU and if I water cool the CPU, there's not a lot that needs heat removed from the inside. But what I'm going to do as far as that goes is I can then come out of this lower one and run into the GPU. Come out of the GPU and dump into the pump, so that my GPU starts with water that's already pre-cooled by this second rad. And maybe I put a couple GPUs in there, in which case I may route the water from the big one to the GPUs and then use the smaller one for the CPU. That I have that flexibility. I don't even know what I want to do yet, but I've got that much. Now, these guys on top can easily be accessed to change the speed of the fans. These on the bottom can be accessed easily. The ones in the back are the ones that can't. And that's where that video of the little trick about how do I fit this in there, because it is a tight fit, top to bottom. Now, if you'll notice these connections down here, I told you I got 245s, but there's also another purpose for this. This little piece here that I cut, I made, if I can get my little fingers in here on camera, I made a little piece here to block the air from coming through the short side. So with this plate out, I can wrap this with some tape or some saran wrap, put a dish pan underneath the unit in the sink in there, and then take off this fitting, one of these multiple fittings here and here, and drain the 420. And of course, this one, the 280, has drain plugs I can reach through the hole from the bottom. Now, this is convenient for me. It's a plug, it's a silver plug. I hope you can see it. If not, I'll put a picture up for you. I can fill this rad up by itself. It's going to run around the back until it kind of fills up, take a lot of the air out. This one would be a problem because my fill spots are down here, except that I located and drilled a hole and I used the drain plug as a fill plug. So I can take this loose, I'll show you a picture of it. I'll take this out and I can fill up this rad all the way down, and of course I can fill up the reservoir. So that'll let me run it through a little bit without having to have so much work just to keep filling at this point here. And again, it's easy to drain, because that is the real problem that a lot of people have when they don't change their baby's diapers. It's because it's a pain in the butt. And this dude is gonna get heavy. This beast is gonna be heavy. Now, fortunately, I have my kitchen right up here, the second kitchen up here, where I can put it across there, put something to catch its water, and so I can, you know, dispose of it in an ecologically responsible manner. That's my plan. I hope I haven't annoyed you guys with something that's not completely built, but I'm not a gamer. I don't pick on gamers, but I need a good video editing machine. And I want to build one that will do anything I want to do and not have to throw all of this out the next time I change a motherboard or a processor or something like that. I want it to be big enough to do anything I want it to do with the least amount of effort in the future. And this is a good case for flexibility. It's just a bit dear. The same thing I have with the fans. I think they're good quality fans at the price I paid for 8 of them. I think in a previous video I said 7, but I was counting my little shiny guys that I have in there, giving it that industrial, multi-frequency drive kind of look type thing, just black and silver, and that's kind of the color thing. But once I put the glass on it, smoked gray, so to speak, you really shouldn't be able to see too much in there. And I'm doing the no lights in this case because it is a water-cooled unit. You will notice that on your AIOs, you notice they don't have clear tubing for them, do they? Because they want them to go 5 years before you throw it away. And most of the cheap ones, the $50 sub 100s, have aluminum rads in them. So don't expect them to do a very good job of cooling. Now, they'll do better maybe than some of the airflow designs I've seen, but they're not made to last forever. These all copper should perform better, plus they are ginormous in their scale. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to run this pump very, very quietly. Although if I have room at the end of this video, I'll put another segment where I show my airflow, where I kind of test to see how much the fans will pull, what speed I need to put them in. It's better to have them on medium and then use the PWM to turn them down to a minimum, but I may not need that. So anyway, I think I've talked enough. I know it's not ready, but I just want to give you a little something to see how your brain works, to see if it's useful to you for any design consideration you have on your next box. Appreciate you watching.